Welcome to the Global Marketing Show, the podcast for all things international business. I'm your host, Wendy Pease, president of Rapport International and a translation expert. Come along with me today as we talk to an expert in the global marketing world about facing their biggest fears, hearing about mistakes they made or saw, discussing best practices, and sharing fun travel, language, and culture stories. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Global Marketing Show. Today's episode is going to be a really good one. If you've ever thought about exporting or you're exporting now and you need some help, there are a ton of resources that are out there. So we're going to have a very lively, good conversation about that. Before we get into that, though, I want to remind you that the Global Marketing Show is brought to you by Rapport International, and they connect you to anyone around the world by providing high-quality language services. And today's tidbit is about the Czech language. There's a word that has no equivalent in English, and it's something we've all done. The word is prozvonit. I hope I'm saying it right. If you speak Czech, let me know. And what that means is to call someone's mobile phone from your own, and then the person doesn't answer, so you can leave your phone number in there and add them to your contacts. Prozvonit is a much easier way to say than explaining it, so I love that. Well, okay, let's get to resources. We just gave you a word resource. Today, we're going to talk to Laurent Kahl. He has extensive private sector experience in the international export-import trade field and 4 decades working for both private and semi-government entities. He now works for UGA's, the University of Georgia's SBDC International Trade Center. But before that, he was a self-employed consultant for Global Footprints. So welcome, Laurent. I'm so happy to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Wendy. I appreciate the opportunity and glad to revisit you again since our last couple, 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was.
Right. That's when you were working on your own. And since then, you've gone to the UGA's SBDC. Why don't we start with those initials? Can you tell me what that means?
Yeah, it's good to mention, because there's so many acronyms in international trade, but the SBDC is Small Business Development Center. And we have a domestic unit that helps with small and mid-sized Georgia companies with various business functions, whether it's financing, human resources, business planning, QuickBooks, franchising, business acquisitions, accounting, et cetera. But on the international side, we also have a SBD International Trade Center here in Georgia. We have 4 business consultants that help with Georgia small and mid-sized businesses with their import-export activities. That could be, similar to the domestic side, international financing, international market research, international logistics, international duties and taxes, documentation, your ecosystems, selection of service providers, naturally translation services like Rapport International. Keep that in mind for translation, and other mouse brokers, freight forwarders, ocean carriers, air carriers, etc., and international sales, marketing, and other things involved with the import-export arena.
Yeah, and you help people find brokers too if they want to do that in the market, right?
Yes, yeah, freight forwarders, custom house brokers, that's correct, yeah. And we also find partners overseas with the help, not only our resources, but with the help of our USIAC, which is our U.S. Export Assistance Center partners, because we'll talk about those as well, but we use their resources as well as we combine both our resources to help these Georgia exporters grow overseas.
Yeah, I was at a networking event last night, IERC, International Executive Resource Group, IERG, I'm sorry. And somebody was asking for distributors in market. And so brokers, partners, distributors, that would all be something you could help with. Okay, so that's the SBDC in the International Trade Office. And then you mentioned the USIAC, USEAC, right?
Right. That's
and
a U.S. Yeah, that's again an acronym for U.S. Export Assistance Centers. These are our partners that we work very closely together, and you'll find this in every state in Georgia, or in the U.S. Excuse me, in every state in the U.S. So the state of South Carolina does it similar with us, or Florida, or any other state in the country. There's 5 different resources in the USIAC. The Department of Commerce. This is a great resource. It's a federal resource. They have many embassies overseas that have consular commercial attachés that help us. Again, we work together to find new distributors, learn about the current conditions of the market for their business, competitor intelligence, currency information, the do's and don'ts of doing business overseas in that country. A lot of things that they can help with, and we also can help with. The Georgia Department of Economic Development. Here in Georgia, we have the state resources, and they have 12 offices overseas, which we can use, staffed by their people, or their Georgian staffed people, folks that can also help in these countries to find distributors, reps, business partners, do some research on current conditions of your industry, and other things that they can provide. The Exim Bank is another export-import bank of the United States. They provide trade insurance for foreign receivables. So if you don't get paid, they can help with 90% of paying your invoice should you have a buyer that doesn't pay. But that's helpful. And also they provide credit, export credit opportunities as well. The Small Business Administration is another resource that also provides export credit, and they have different programs for exporters, Georgia exporters. And the last one is the Georgia District Export Council, which is an organization of current active executives that are involved with shipping. It could be with large exporters or shipping companies or insurance companies. Just a group of trained, highly skilled export executives that can help also companies with additional advice and counsel. So we have all these resources available in addition to our international consulting team, which we have here at the University of Georgia, which are 4 of us that are highly skilled, highly educated, and highly experienced.
Resources to help exporters. Can you talk about how these were all developed and why they're developed?
Well, it's just that, the exporting mechanics is something that you need to learn about. It, it's a little more complex than selling domestically, right? All you do is put something in a box here when you sell it domestically, and it's shipped, and you invoice a customer, and it's a pretty easy, not as complex as selling a product from U.S. to another country, because you have more hands that deal with the product, and there's documentation involved. There's also the banking transactions. It's just a lot more complexity. So these resources were developed to help the new and active exporters in the state with not only their the from starting from zero, but also the more complex problems that exporters have with, say, duty problems overseas, and trying to get better advocacy work that they could do to help you get a better entry into that market because of a duty or some kind of a barrier that might exist in that market. But all these, the banking, XM, and Small Business Administration is to help with some of the financing part of it. And then ourselves, the Georgia Department of Economic Development and Department of Commerce is more on the market entry and marketing and digital marketing, and just all the basic export mechanics that you might, operations type of things that you may come across.
So a lot of these are government agencies, and I don't think about going to a government agency and paying to get services. Usually they're provided. What are the kind of costs that an exporter might incur in Georgia for this?
Well, for us, we're cost-free, but there's some programs for like the Department of Commerce that you have to pay. They have Gold Key. There's some other things that they do that you have to pay for. The Georgia Department of Economic Development, all their work is at no cost, because the U.S. the Georgia companies are paying taxes, which pays for their services and our services as well. But there are things that you have to pay for, and there's some export grants, for example, with the Georgia Department of Economic Development that you could apply for to help you pay some of your marketing costs or translation costs, or just the different things that you can apply towards when you're selling overseas.
So I had heard that the governments provide these services because our balance of trade is so far off. Like, we import so much more that we want to export more. That's why the government has set up all these.
Oh,
Can you speak to that?
yeah, well, that's true. We import 2/3 of our balance of trade is import versus 1/3 export, but it's growing. Our export is growing. Naturally, that's the key, is to promote more U.S. exports, because the bottom line is they're going to create more jobs, new products, stronger companies here in Georgia or in the U.S. And there's a lot of benefits of creating more export sales.
Yeah, so it sounds like if you run a business and you're in Georgia, you're in luck. So what about all the other states? Can you talk about, I'm sure you don't know it as much as you know Georgia, because that's where you work, but do they
Right.
all have those different opportunities?
Yes, good question. For example, in the Southeast, in Florida, they have, in the University of West Florida, they have an international trade SBDC, so similar to us. And they also, naturally, they have their state offices and other, the XM does the same thing. SBA helps, with the same kind of functions in that state. Same thing with South Carolina. There's a international trade center in the University of South Carolina in Columbia, South Carolina, the capital. And also in Birmingham, Alabama, the University of Alabama in Birmingham, I think it is. I'm not sure if it's Birmingham, but it's in the University of Alabama. They have a ITC as well. So all these, most of these states have the similar resources. Yes, that's correct. But there are some states that operate a little bit differently. The SBDCs are not associated with the university. They might do, has a different type of setup or function.
Yes, I'm based in Massachusetts, and in Massachusetts, we have the SBDC, but we also have the Mass Export, which is it's more closely tied to the Department of Commerce, and you can go in and get the services, but it's somewhat tied with the SBDC, but it's operated separately, and it's not based. The SBDCs are at the university, but Mass Export isn't. And I think that's the same with New Hampshire and Maine, but Rhode Island is at Bryant University.
Oh,
and then
okay.
And then in Texas, it's actually in the Department of Agriculture, the trade.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I think bottom line is that we're talking about is that no matter where you're exporting from in the United States, there is a state resource that can help you. Where should somebody start?
Well, I think, they're all very competent, and I think, try all of them, but you could start with the SBDC or the state. The federal is also very useful, but I think those are good ways to start, particularly, being a very small business. If you have a very small business development center, or the SBA could be a good starting point. If your business is medium size or larger size, then you could go directly to some of the federal and also the state as well. But for a smaller startup, not startup, but more of the smaller, newly created, a couple years in business, SBDC or SBA, I think would be a good start. And also SCORE for startups, but that's another thing that they could look at.
Right, that's the retired people that are advising through the SBA.
Correct.
Right. So it sounds like finding your state export center, the UCX, are the best way. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes. So if anybody wants to reach out, no matter what state you're in, you'll be able to find it. But if you're in Georgia, you definitely want to reach out to Laurent, because he's the go-to person there. Earlier, you mentioned in the Department of Commerce, there's embassies and consulates. So if I'm an exporter and I'm looking for support, do I go to an embassy or a consulate, and what's the difference?
Well, normally the commercial part of it, where the commercial attaché is in an embassy overseas. But when you start the process with the Department of Commerce here in the U.S., they will make the connection with you with that embassy, the commercial attaché in that country, in the embassy of that country. For the consulate is more for visas and travel and those kind of things. So for the, for the business purpose traveling and documents and things of that nature. Unless you know some other things that I don't know, Wendy, is anything else that you want to address on those two?
No, I just thought it was always very interesting about, you
Right.
hear embassy and consulate. So thanks for the explanation. And I know that, and they all have the commercial attaché, and they're very willing to help because I've reached out to them before, and they're very knowledgeable.
Yeah, it's always good to go through the U.S. Department of Commerce first, your contact in that state, in your state, and then they'll contact the commercial attaché in the embassy of that country that you're wanting to enter or learn about.
Right. Yes. I wanted to do some research on a company that I was going to partner with, and they were able to do some research and get back to me and let me know if there were any, danger things I should watch out for. Luckily, I got a clear report. They couldn't find anything on the company, so I assume that was a clear report, and it's gone well since. So, all right. So prior to going to Georgia, you were an independent an independent consultant to help people with export and import. If I'm an exporter, how do I decide when to work with the state, the DOC, the Exim Bank, or whether I go to a private consultant?
Well, naturally, you want to use all the free resources first, the cost-free resources such as the USIAC partners that we talked about. But naturally, when you use a private consultant, you have to pay for their, by the hour or by the project. Sometimes, the private consultant has very highly specialized information or knowledge about a particular product or industry or country. So sometimes you may want to consider using the private versus the cost-free services of a USIAC partner. It just depends, I think. But it's good. I think it's good to get you can always get an opinion from the various sources and learn from all of them too as well. So actually, sometimes you pay for what you get, right? Sometimes you can get some really good advice from private consultants. So I did it for 4 years, but coming here now to the University of Georgia, I've never learned how many more resources are out there, particularly if, for example, in our university or with our library, we have so many databases that we can use to research not only domestic data, but also international data. And we also have interns that we can introduce to companies to help them with projects throughout the year. And we can also use professors and associate professors to do research on the latest and greatest type of project the company may have.
Oh, that's fantastic. Those are things I never even thought about with the UCX, with the state trade or state export centers. But that's right. If you're at a university, you naturally have all that. And then I've heard about internship programs where the state will actually pay if the intern goes to work at the company because they get experience.
Okay, I didn't know about that, but we have intern programs where the company would have to pay, depending on whether it's an undergraduate or graduate student, a certain amount, whether it's by the hour or by the project. But normally those are paid programs. And so, but we do offer that with all our colleges, everything from engineering to agriculture, et cetera.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. So then that's probably, it varies by state, because it was one state in particular. It was either Kansas or Iowa, I think, that had the program. So, if anybody's really interested in that, you're based in one of those in Kansas, Iowa. It wasn't Nebraska, give me a call and I'll figure out what it was. What about, I've heard of other programs like Getting to Global and Soft Land Partners and these other organizations. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, well, I'm a member of Softland Partners, so I can talk about that. But that's a great resource for companies that are, particularly for companies overseas that want to penetrate the U.S. or even U.S. companies that want to go to Europe or other parts of the world. But it helps with planning the market entry into that country. There's some great resources and a lot of folks from all over the world that could also provide guidance and naturally some are consultants and some are specialists that you may have to pay for. But yeah, Wendy, I think you're also a member of Softland Partners, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, I am. And that's one thing that I've seen from there is even if you start with the state, but you're still looking for deeper knowledge or connections, work with the providers, because you're part of Softland Partners. I know there's freight people, there's currency exchange, there's consultants, there's PEOs. And so if I want to get knowledge about something, I can go to them, or I can post on the Slack channel for help that I want. So is that your experience?
Yeah, I've helped some of my clients also with SLP, some of the SLP folks, connected with them, whether it's foreign exchange or specialties that that I know about, but I'm not an expert on it. So yeah, correct.
Right.
Yeah, and
Right.
we do make, when we make recommendations to our clients, whether they're custom house brokers or foreign exchange traders or lawyers or CPAs, we have to give at least 3 to 5 companies for them to talk to and select and make a decision on.
So it's real important for you to be out there meeting the vendors to know who you
Right.
can refer. Yeah, that's good. Where do people go if they want more general information about how to start exporting?
Again, use the internet. You can look for buy some books on exporting, general how to export or exporting. There's a lot of good books out there. Also, marketing. If you want to look for a good marketing book, this is by the author, yours truly, Wendy P. So, but yeah, the internet is a great place to to start learning about exporting. And I have I have both electronic and hard copy versions of with my library here of import export literature. But yeah, that's a good way of doing it. And then with your contacts at the Georgia Department of Commerce, the U.S. Department of Commerce, the different folks can also provide you other additional training and information as well.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks so much for holding up my book in the language of global marketing. So I did write it to give a background to people of how to think about your communications. Before we started recording, you mentioned another book that you said was really good. It was the Definitive Bible to Exporting or something. Can you tell us
The
about that
author
too?
is Laurel Delaney. I think she did a really great job. The last version I have was 2 years ago. Let me see if I can pull it out, but this is the book here,
So
Exporting.
it's Exporting: The Definitive Guide to Selling Abroad Profitably.
Yeah, it's very, very thorough. And also the fellow that created NASBite, Jim Foley, he's created the NASBite, the group of international trade folks. And this is the book he created. This is a very good book too. So
Global Entrepreneur.
The
Okay.
Global Entrepreneur, Taking Your Business International. I think there might be a 5th version. I have the 4th version. Those
Good.
two
We'll put
those
links
two,
to the show notes in there, Laurent,
yeah.
so people can find it. And NASBit, that's another one that you mentioned that we hadn't talked about. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, this is a group of professional global business professionals. They have a certification that you apply for, and you can you have to study and test for it. And these are people from all different disciplines of business, very, very experienced folks. And we as a consultant here, we had to take the exam as part of the certification to go through our training program here at University of Georgia International Trade Center. So, but yeah, and also there's a lesser cost export training called the exportu.com. And I'm not sure what the fee's going to be, but that's another certification you can do. They've got about 12 video webinars on there. It took me about maybe 40 hours a week to go through all of them and go through all their tests. And it's another way of just kind of picking up. Naturally, I've been in the import export for 4 decades, but you're always learning. And I learned some things in there in addition to these books that and the NASBite CGBP certification that I did this last early December, January this year.
What was the hardest topic? I just have to ask.
Well, it depends on what your weakness is. For me, it was compliance because, I've always been involved with marketing and sales in my career, selling internationally. And so, marketing and the finance was fairly not easy, but I knew quite a lot about it. There's 4 or 5 different areas, but compliance was one of them that I think was, for me, it was the most difficult, because we always had a department with the multinational companies I worked for that they took care of that. That
Yeah, the
so
clients,
you really
yeah.
didn't think about it. You didn't know. I mean, you knew about it, but you didn't know all the ins and outs of what's important and what
Yeah.
wasn't. So,
All right,
yeah.
I'm going to jump topics back to, because we're talking about resources. Sometimes I hear about FDI, or foreign direct investment. What could you tell us about that?
Well, mostly the FDI is more involved with the state. Georgia Department, for example, here in Georgia, the Georgia Department of Economic Development, they have a team that's involved with a foreign direct investment for companies overseas that want to invest in the state of Georgia. And also Softland Partners can help a little bit on that as another source. Now, Wendy, I don't know if you have any other ones that you could tell us about, unless are there other resources that you know about it?
Yeah, so FDI would be the state is investing to try to get people from outside of the US to come in. And then how about Select USA?
I'm not very familiar with that, but maybe, do you know much about it? I'm sorry, I didn't. I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's probably a little, I think it's the conference, Softland Partners talks a lot about it, but I think it's a conference that might be more aligned with FDI, where it's people coming into the United States. So that's
Right.
kind of out of your realm. Yeah. And have you ever heard of Getting to Global?
Getting to global. Not familiar, but I'm always willing to learn.
Yeah, Josh set it up. That's another website you can get to, Getting to Global. Josh was an attaché, I think, commercial attaché down in Mexico, I think. And then he recognized that exporters needed support here. You're nodding your head. I can see on the video when we're recording this. So what did you know?
Oh, no, yeah, Josh. Now you remind me. Sorry about that. Yeah, but yeah.
Okay. So, but you don't run across it too much.
Well, I've attended some of his webinars. He's had some e-commerce webinars, for 2 or 3 of them. One for Asia, Europe, and I think Latin America. They were well done, and I learned some things about e-commerce and some contacts in that field. So that could be another source for education, and also for looking at as a market tool.
Okay. So there we've got webinars, we've got books, we've got places you can go talk to people, we've got research. You mentioned Gold Key earlier. I wanted to come back to that. What can you tell us about the Gold Key program?
Well, that's a program established by the Department of Commerce, the U.S. Department of Commerce. And what it does is they kind of pretty much find distributors for you, or partners, whether reps or distributors or government entities, or I'm not sure, whatever market channel you decide to go to with when you want to export. And they'll set up meetings for you. They'll pick you up and take you to these potential partners, and just kind of hold your hands and help you through the whole process. I mean, but there's a fee on there. I'm not sure what the current fee is, but it's a great program. I've never used it, but I've heard some very, very positive things about it. And they also have some other ones. There's 2 or 3 that other paid type of programs that they offer.
Oh, okay. That's the Department of Commerce. So reaching out to your state trade rep will certainly be able to introduce you to the right person and find out. How about STEP grants? It's another thing we hear a lot about.
Yeah, well, here in Georgia, it's called the Go Global Export STEP grant. And this is managed and distributed by the Georgia Department of Economic Development. This is how they do it here in Georgia. So this is a grant that, new and also existing exporters can apply for. This grant that could be applied towards travel, your flight expenses. Not sure can't travel first class, but you can apply towards your economy class fare. You can apply towards a web, translation with Report International, or you could use it for literature, your literature, marketing materials. There's just a lot of different things that you can apply towards.
Yeah, we've liked the STEP grants because people have gotten them and come to us for, their marketing and for translation. So I think it's a great way. And then they could, we make sure it's quality. So they're actually attracting the business that they want. Yeah. Okay. So now we've gone through a bunch of other resources. I can't think of any other ones offhand unless you can.
Well, like anything else, try to use all the resources you can use, not only the service providers, like, with translation people, your freight forwarder, your ocean carrier, even the people overseas, your custom house broker, the government folks overseas, the Department of Commerce folks. Just try to think about all the resources that you could use and obtain information, market intelligence, competitor intelligence, et cetera.
Yeah, that's really, and I'm glad you said that, because I think we talked a little bit about it, but all the providers are so connected in with each other, and they'll know what they can do and what they can't. So if you're talking to somebody like me, that I do translation, ask for resources, and then we'll put a link in the show notes to find your state trade rep, because that sounds like the best place to start. All right, so now we've talked about all these resources. Can you give me a story about an exporter that came to you in Georgia at the SBDC and said, I want to start exporting, or this is what I've done and I want to grow?
Sure. Well, I just got a recent client about 8 months ago or so that I'm not sure, we can't put a name to the client, but is a manufacturer of specialty carpets. His company particularly does Southwestern type of designs on these carpets, American Indian Southwestern design, very specialty type of item or niche, I guess. And came to us. We looked at some research. We did some research on what would be the top 2 or 3 markets for him. And we saw that the Japanese love Americana type of products. And so through the Georgia Department of Economic Development, which they have an office in Japan, we were able to provide him at least maybe 5 different resources of potential partners. So they've now been through the due diligence, and they've met each other virtually and all that. He's sent samples. So hopefully now they'll be getting some container orders and get that process going. So that's one example where we're helping this new to export carpet manufacturer in Northwest Georgia.
Fantastic. And who'd have thought that a carpet manufacturer would be exporting? That's what I always love about hearing the stories, is it's the people who are inspired that actually do it, that benefit from higher revenues, higher profits, higher salaries, higher valuations. I mean, the DOC research just blows me away.
Yeah, I mean, it's in Southwestern design, it's so, niche, and actually another market we're looking at is Canada, because there's a lot of, some of that American Indian influence up in the northern Canadian states up there. So that's another country that we're going to be helping, or we'll be helping this company out. But there's just so many things that if you have a product or service that could be modified, it could be exportable. Naturally, we'd have to look at it. There's potential for all kinds of things, and there's products here that you can't sell here that are great products for overseas business. So
love the story of Walter Brooks from Georgia. Makes a barbecue sauce. He's episode 81 on our podcast. He was at a food trade show, and somebody from Georgia came up and said, have you ever thought about exporting? He said, yeah, as any entrepreneur would say. And he ended up going on a couple of trips to the Middle East and has signed millions of dollars of contracts for his barbecue sauce.
There you go.
Yeah, so the episode's a great story to hear. Walter Brooks from Brooks Maids Gourmet. Yeah, and then the other thing that surprises me is when you hear about services being the #1 export. So even if you own a consulting company or a marketing services or web development, think about going international, because huge opportunity.
Specialty consulting, boutique consulting, those kind of things. Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Software, all these new technologies, those are all services, very intangible products, right? So naturally they have to be modified. You got to put it in their language. You got to metric versus English system. There's things that you have to think about, to modify to their culture and language, to their culture and I'm
glad you say that. That's exactly what we do. I appreciate that call out. So what advice would you have for people
regarding
exporting? Yeah, I left that
I
wide
think
open.
no, that always think about it, because it does. When there's hard times here in the U.S., it can offset your slow sales here in the U.S. and also brings in new customers. You can get new ideas for modifying your products, not only overseas, but also here, improve your product here. You'll grow your business. Hopefully you'll employ more people, and you'll be a step ahead of your competitor. Your domestic competitor may not be exporting, but you might, and you'll be growing and also learning and having a more dynamic business, and hopefully one that will even survive not only future recessions, but here in the U.S., but also global recessions, because you're so diversified. This is why the multinationals are so big, because they're all in every part of the world. And when one region of the world is down, the other one's up, and it offsets their businesses, right? And it helps revenues from one region helps offset the other. So that's why they're multinationals. That's why they're on the top, Fortune 500s, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. That the companies have the chance to grow bigger by being across nations. And also what's interesting is the statistics from the Department of Commerce is like the majority of companies that exports are small and mid-size companies. They grow faster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. Always look into exporting, definitely.
Always, yeah, always looking towards exporting. I love that. Okay, so I'm going to end on this. What's your favorite foreign word?
Oh, Lordy. The last time you asked me, I said bricoleur, which is a collector of experience, of memories, of, that I think it's a great word in French. This time, oh my gosh, I don't know. Oh, you caught me off
Same
guard.
word, if it's still your favorite.
Yeah, let's use it. I'm sorry. I didn't think you were going to ask me the same question. I thought maybe you'd come back at something different, but
If you remembered which word you gave, that means it is. So say the word again.
bricoleur, bricolleur. It means collector in French. So bricoleur of memories, bricoleur memories or experiences or what. So yeah, for you it's stories, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love to collect stories and memories because I love to travel. So bricoleur, I'm going to have to start adding that into my repertoire.
Right, there you go.
So Laurent, this has been a pleasure again. This is going to be an episode that I refer back to and send on to people because it's just so helpful to talk about all the resources that are out there. So where can people get in touch with you if they want to reach you?
In Georgia, naturally, my email is lkahl, LKAHL, at georgiasbdc.org. And my work phone is 678-203-0522. This is for Georgia. And actually, we only SBDC here in Georgia. We only can help Georgia companies because that's just our modus operandi. Just so like the people in Florida do or the South Carolina, they can really only help companies established in their state.
Okay, so if you're in Georgia, reach out to Laurent. If you're in another state and you want help, go to the show notes, click on the link as to where the other state contacts are. We have it on our website, so we'll drop it in there. And then reach out to them and tell them that Laurent Kahl from the University of Georgia International Trade Center sent you. And if you want any help on getting a STEP grant to get your website or your marketing materials developed and translated, certainly reach out to me because we can help you develop a quote and then know what to apply for when you talk to your state trade rep. So this has been a delight. Merci beaucoup.
Muchas gracias. Merci beaucoup. Obrigado. Thank you. Grazie. Well, anyway, so thank you so much. I enjoyed it, Wendy. And thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to talk to you and being interviewed again for the second time. And don't forget to use Wendy's translation services in her book, Global Marketing. And yeah, thank you again, Wendy. Appreciate it.
That's a wrap for this session. A big thanks to you for listening to the Global Marketing Show. Hope you had just as much fun as I did. New sessions launch weekly on all places you find podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and of course on our website. If you know someone interested in this topic, please tell them about us. Au revoir for now.